Today's lesson is going to be on time signature. Before we get started on that, we have a couple other definitions here to go over. Number one is tempo. Tempo is the speed of the music or the number on the metronome. You can also think of that as if the music is fast or slow. Sometimes there's medium tempos. There's all kinds of terms that you'll learn later that give you an idea of how fast or slow, and those are called tempo markings. So it's the speed of the music. It's also the number on the metronome. So if your metronome is set at 88, then your tempo is 88. Now, along with that is BPM. That means beats per minute, and that's how many times the metronome will sound in 1 minute. So if your tempo is 88, your metronome set on 88, then it is on 88 BPM, meaning it's going to click 88 times in 1 minute. Okay, so if it's at 60 BPM would mean it's going to click once every second. Okay, if it's on 120 BPM, which is a pretty common tempo, then that when it's on 120, it's clicking twice per second. Okay, so that's kind of how tempo and beats per minute kind of go together, because your tempo is often described in, I'm going to be going 92 BPM, 92 beats per minute, okay? All right, now, those two things kind of go along with time signature, because time signature has to do with the way the music is divided and measured out, and tempo and the feel of the music and the pulse and things like that. So that's why they're on this worksheet, but they are kind of independent as well. All right, time signature. Numbers that appear at the beginning of a song to tell you how many beats are in a measure and what kind of a note gets one beat, okay? So again, numbers at the beginning of a song that tell you how many beats are in a measure and what kind of note gets one beat. And we're going to go over what that means. So here you'll see it's two numbers stacked on top of each other. It kind of looks like a fraction. And so often, even I'll do this sometimes if I'm writing, I'll say like 3/4 time. But it's really not a fraction. The reason it looks like that is when you put it on a staff, this third line kind of goes through the middle of the staff, and so it sort of looks like there's a line in between. But technically, it's just the two numbers, okay? You could have 4/4 time, 3/4 time, 2/4 time, 6/8 time, 5/8 time, 2/2 time. There's lots of different time signatures. We're going to just talk about kind of some basic ones right now, and we'll go over others later, and you'll learn more as you go along. So the top number here, you'll see the top number of the time signature tells you how many beats are in one measure. So in this case, it's kind of funny because it has 4/4 times. So let's do it 3/4 for a second. So the top number tells you how many beats are in a measure. So in this measure right here, you would expect to have 3 beats of music before the next bar line. And then this measure would have 3 beats of music, and so on. Okay, each measure gets 3 beats of music because there's a 3 on the top number, okay? The bottom number of a time signature tells you what kind of note gets a beat. Now, often the bottom number of a time signature is 4, especially at first, when you're first learning to play music. Often the bottom numbers are 4. Other common time signatures on the bottom, you might have a 2 or you might have an 8. We're not going to talk about the 8 quite yet, but we are going to talk about the 2, and then we'll get to this in another lesson sometime. All right, so how many beats are in a measure of 4/4 time? You look at the top number. The top number tells you there are 4 beats in a measure. What kind of note gets one beat in this time signature? Draw it. Now, this is where what you're going to do, you're going to look at the bottom number, and you're going to think of it like a fraction. So this would be a quarter note, because it's a 4 on the bottom is a quarter. So a quarter note gets a beat. And if you'll think about it, that's what we've learned, is that a quarter note gets one beat. The reason we say that as though it's always true is because right now, almost all the time, it will be true. Depending on the time signature, that can change, but in regular, 3/4, 4/4, 2/4, the quarter note does get one beat. Okay, let's do another one. How many beats are in this measure? Well, what changed here is the top number. So the top number is telling you that there are 2 beats in this measure now. Okay, and then it says what kind of note gets one beat in this time signature? Well, it's the same number. It's still a 4. So it's going to be the same answer. It's still a quarter note because a 4 on the bottom means it's 1/4 note, gets a beat, okay? All right, then this one, it changes now. So the top number is still the same. How many beats are in a measure? Still 2, but here's what's different. It says, what kind of note gets 1 beat in this time signature? Draw it. So this is different. There's a 2 on the bottom. So you're gonna put a 1 over a 2, and you know that that is a half. So that means a half note gets a beat. So you'll be playing in this time signature later. You're probably not playing in it, real soon, but it's important that you understand that that bottom number is not always a 4. It can change. And so in this case, if you're in 2/2 time, that's also sometimes called cut time because things are cut in half. A half note gets 1 beat. Notice that's half of what it would normally get. So 2/2 time, a half note gets a beat because there's a 2 on the bottom. Okay, so that's kind of your way of showing us that you understand that when this bottom number changes, this is going to change. Even if you don't totally understand why and how to apply that, you need to understand the idea that when this number changes, the bottom number changes, that answer is going to change, okay? All right, so now let's fill in. These are the 2 time signatures you're probably going to play in the most at first, 4/4 and 3/4. So we're going to do some practice. Now you need to read these directions very carefully to do it right. Fill in the measures with 1 and only 1 rest, not note, when needed. So there's only going to be 1 correct answer. This is not where you just fill in whatever you want. You're going to fill in exactly the correct answer. So fill in the measures with 1 and only 1 rest, not note, when needed. When needed, that means it may not always be needed, to equal the correct number of beats for the time signature at the beginning of the line. So the most important thing to figure out right now, the top number is a 4. So what does that tell us? That tells us that there are going to be 4 beats per measure, okay? The bottom number's a 4 also, so it's just telling us a quarter note gets a beat, which is the same thing we've been talking about before, so that should be no problem. All right, but we're only going to add 1 rest, not note. So right here, we've got 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that measure's good. We don't need to add anything. Here, you need to add 1 rest that is worth 4 beats. So if you'll remember, our whole rest gets 4 beats. So that's the one that looks like a hole in the ground. So you're going to draw a whole rest, and then you've added 4 beats of rest using only 1 rest. That's the only correct answer in that measure. Okay, now here, we need a total of 4 beats. We have 1 beat here and 1 beat here, so we need 2 more beats. So you're trying to think of a rest that gets 2 beats. That's a half rest. Remember, this one looks like a hat, like a top hat. So you're going to put a box on the top of the line, and that makes it a half rest, which is 2 beats, and gives you a total of 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that measure is complete. All right, now look at this measure. You have 2 beats in the half note, 1, 2, and then here you need 2 more. So we're going to do that same half rest. Now look at this one. You have 3 quarter notes, so that means you've used 3 beats. You need 1 more beat. So you're going to draw a quarter rest. Remember, we do that as a Z with a C underneath. Okay, before we move forward onto the next line, I need to tell you one thing. There is a new note that we're going to learn about in a future lesson. It's called a dotted half note. It looks like a half note, and it has a dot after it, and it is worth 3 beats. So I'm going to explain that a whole lot more in a future lesson, but for now you just need to know that this symbol is a dotted half note and it gets 3 beats. Okay, the reason you need to know that is on this next line we are in 3/4 time, which means each measure needs 3 beats. So here you'll see you have 1, 2, 3 in the first measure, so that's correct. In the next measure, you're going to also need 3 beats. And if you look at the directions, it says 1 and only 1 note. So we need a note that gets 3 beats. So that's why it's important that you understand that there is a note called a dotted half note that gets 3 beats. So we're going to put that right here, dotted half note. Here we are missing 1 beat, so we have 1, 2 beats, we need 1 more. So you think about what kind of note gets 1 beat, and it's a quarter note. Here we also need 3 beats at the end. This gets 1 and 2, so we have 1 beat left. So again, it's going to be a quarter note. And then you figure out what this one is, and go ahead and add it. And you should have added a quarter note. And if you check, each measure has 3 beats because it's 3/4 time, 3 beats in a measure.